I actually learned how to do water photography before I really knew how to surf. So as I've gotten better at surfing and really love surfing, it's always been a dilemma of like, am I going to surf or am I going to shoot? Mm-hmm. And at the start of my journey with surfing, it was always, it just killed me as to like, I'd be surfing and then I'd see these gorgeous waves and I'd be like, I should have been shooting.
That's Sachi Cunningham, I'm Jamie Brissick, and this is Soundings, brought to you by the Surfer's Journal. The Journal is a member-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Costa Sunglasses, FCS, Finisterre, Howler Brothers, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. More like a book than a magazine, the Journal delivers 136 pages of independent storytelling every 8 weeks, covering the people, culture, travel, and art of surfing. To learn more and to subscribe, please visit surfersjournal.com. Sachi Cunningham is a Northern California-based photographer and filmmaker. For more than 2 decades, she's been training her lens on women and the pioneers of big wave surfing. Sachi, who holds a BA in history from Brown University and a Master's of Journalism from UC Berkeley, started the first video team at the LA Times, where she produced the award-winning series Chasing the Swell, which documents the first ever big wave world tour. She was the first person, male or female, ever to have water shots published of Wily Ocean Beach. This was in Surfer magazine. Other firsts include serving as the first female board member of Save the Waves Coalition and first woman to receive the Wave Saver Award. She documented the first woman heats at the Mavericks WickrX Invitational, the Puerto Escondido Big Wave Challenge, the Hui Backdoor Shootout, and the Eddy. Sachi has been included in both Surfline's list of top filmmakers and Surfer magazine's list of top photographers. Her feature-length documentary, SheChange, about the quest for pay equity in big wave surfing, is presently in post-production and has been featured in the New York Times and on the Today Show. A mental health advocate and cancer survivor, Sachi lives with her husband and 12-year-old daughter in the Outer Sunset neighborhood of San Francisco, where she's a professor emerita at San Francisco State University. We spoke in the library of Headlands Center for the Arts in Sausalito, California. Formerly an Army barracks, the artist Barry McGee has called Headlands the greatest artist residency in America. It was a bright, quintessentially NorCal day. Out the window, the eucalyptus trees whistled. Down the valley, wind-swept waves hammered the beach. Sachi, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you. So I guess the first question I would have is, looking at, you've done so much and so much great work, how did you find your way to the camera or the moving picture or the video camera or the film camera? At what point did you have this sort of visual sensibility and go, I want to make this stuff?
Yeah, I think I had, what is the type of film that's like, I had a tiny point and shoot when I was a young kid and really liked taking photos. I wasn't trained at all, but just enjoyed capturing moments. And I think from the start I was trying to tell stories with the pictures and thinking of bigger ideas with the pictures than the pictures themselves. When I was 16, I got my first DSLR camera for my birthday. So that's, I guess, when I kind of started practicing more in earnest. And I think in my senior year of high school, maybe, or no, it would have been later, maybe in college, I got my first, high 8 camera. Mm-hmm. So was doing some video work. I did a thesis my senior year of college that was a video project, an independent study, kind of my first documentary that was about mixed race women at Brown University. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And at what point did you realize you wanted to be in the water with the camera?
Yeah, and actually I should backtrack, and my dad also was a photographer, and so he occasionally would turn our bathroom into a dark room.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that probably had some influence also on my visual journey. And then bringing the camera in the water, it's funny, I have to credit my dad, even though my dad was not necessarily the most encouraging of this water surf photography career at all. I do have to credit him with introducing me to the idea, because when I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, very far from any type of ocean, and before the internet, so the television programming is, programmed, and it just so happened that my dad was watching this documentary on PBS that featured Aaron Chang doing water photography. I have no idea what the documentary was or really what it was about, but he just said, "Sachi, come down here. I think you might be interested in this." And so I came down and I saw this guy and his camera in the waves, and I just had never even heard of or seen such a thing. But at that point, I loved body surfing. I loved the camera, and it was just like, oh, well, this is it. Like that's where I need to be. So I just kind of stored that idea and went off to college. And when I had my first job, it was time to pursue that dream. So I was teaching English in Japan, and happens to be a great place to buy cameras. So I bought my first DSLR. I mean, I was still a DSLR camera, and I looked at the masthead of the surf magazines there and called around to, this is also still pre-internet, so started making calls to some of these photographers on the masthead and just asking if I could follow them around. And one of them let me follow him around and shadow him, and that was really the start. And he put me in touch with someone who made a custom housing for that. And so I took my first water photos when I was living in Japan.
Okay. And then didn't you kind of go around the world to, you in our conversations earlier, you'd mentioned sort of traveling a whole bunch to improve and to kind of really dive in.
Yeah. So after my year of teaching English in Japan, I worked for another year doing marketing at a movie theater in Tokyo, and during that time saving money to buy this water housing, buy this camera, practicing some on this tiny island south of Kagoshima, which is where I was teaching, the southernmost part of Kyushu, the southernmost island. And so I knew I just wanted to travel and try and practice this thing, this idea of water photography that was in my mind. And so I knew that, I was in a part of the world that had some good waves, namely Indonesia. And so I traveled to 14 different countries over the course of a year, but the last stop was Indonesia, where I stayed for 2 months, and I actually overstayed my visa. Traveled all over Indonesia, and that's when I really was hooked, because the waves there are incredible and the surfers were incredible, and I just got that rush of synchronicity that happens when you get in a barrel with a surfer and capture that magic moment.
Yep. So taking that from a more sort of organized lineup like Uluwatu or Padang Padang, and then later going to Ocean Beach in San Francisco, which is like one of the most wild lineups, and then Mavericks. And you're one of the few people who kind of actually go in with fins, and we see a lot of images from the boat or a ski, but not in the water, not actually swimming. What's it like to be out at Mavs, let's say, shooting from the water?
It's thrilling. It's exciting. It's it's also challenging. The reason why you don't see a lot of photographers there, and I don't always shoot there. If I have an assignment that I have to get a shot of someone, I'm not going to swim, because it's a crapshoot. Like there can be a 60-foot wave coming to you, but you have like 1 foot of chop in front of you and you can't see anything. So it's really hard to guarantee a shot that way. I think what I really like about Ocean Beach and Mavericks is just the amount of energy. I like the cold water. I like the rawness. I just think I like deep water. Yeah, I think it's more about the energy and the environment as anything.
Yeah. Water photography is an interesting one, water surf photography in particular, because it's a visual art, but it's also so physical, and it's so, I mean, you mentioned Aaron Chang earlier. I'm sort of the same generation where his pictures were all over the magazines when I was growing up, and I got to meet him, and I always so admired the fact that as someone who later came to writing, there was a sort of sedentary thing of writing where it was wonderful, a wonderful form of expression, but you sit in a chair all day, and at the end of the day you feel irritable because of that. And then surfing itself, you go out and you do it, and you feel absolutely wonderful, but you don't have this visual evidence of it all. And water surf photography seems to do both.
It does. I mean, that's, yeah. I mean, it's combines all of the things I love, which is making visual stories and being physical. And so, yeah, the fact that it combines them all. It also still is, you're still behind a lens, you're still framing things up. So I think it also, yes, I'm able to both be physical and be in the waves and, kind of having the experience of kind of surfing while also capturing. But in the capturing, you're still removing yourself somewhat. Mm-hmm. So I actually learned how to do water photography before I really knew how to surf. So as I've gotten better at surfing and really love surfing, it's always been a dilemma of like, am I going to surf or am I going to shoot? Mm-hmm. And at the start of my journey with surfing, it was always, it just killed me as to like, I'd be surfing and then I'd see these gorgeous waves and I'd be like, I should have been shooting. But if I've been shooting also where I've just been like, I don't want to go home and edit these photos. It's still work, you know. It's what I love, but it's still work. And you're 20 yards away from the surfers. You're all by yourself. They're all chatting and having fun and being social and like. It's also, I really love the ephemeral nature of surfing and not capturing anything. And so I like to honor that. And I try to do that. I think it's good for me to not be trying to capture everything all the time. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What about, of all your work, your extensive body of work, what are you most proud of so far?
I am very proud of the photos and videos and stories I've told in this part of the world, the cold water and less traveled parts of Northern California waves. And the two documentaries that I've made, Crutch, about a dancer with a hip disability that does a hybrid of breakdancing and skateboarding on crutches. That one took me 20 years, so I hope I'm proud of that. I'm not proud of how long it took me, but and then I'm about to, hopefully in the next year, people will be able to see this documentary, SheChange, about 4 of the world's best big wave surfers who are women, and their quest to get into the Mavericks contest and along the way creating equal pay in the World Surf League.
So I watched what may not be the final cut, but I watched what to my mind seemed like a final cut. And first of all, it's so good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And what sort of compelled you to make it? And let's talk about it, because I thought it was so powerful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be I'm going to retire after that, I think. I don't know, or move on to like lay making or I don't know, something else. Actually, writing is something I might want to move into. But yeah, that one took me 10 years, so half as long. But I really feel like it's a culmination of my life's work. I think it is the most important project I've done in my career, because it's combining everything from the social justice storytelling that is why I got into filmmaking in the first place, because I think films really have the power to create change and change the way people think. Mm-hmm. And that's what interested me in the medium in the first place. And so, yeah, so there's that. And then I also got into water photography. Largely, I was attracted to the stories of women, mostly because I saw an opportunity there. I didn't see many photos of women in the magazines, and I thought that there should be. So So I started, off shooting photos of women, and I met Bianca that way, and working with her at Ocean Beach, and then this woman named Nico Sell, who's owned a tech app called Wicker. It's a messaging app, and she hosted an event for a dozen women at Mavericks in 2014 that it couldn't be a call to contest because there's only one permit that was allowed that the Coastal Commission issues a year, so they couldn't call it an official contest, so it was an invitational event. But she flew all these women to Mavericks, and I was covering it for the SF Chronicle and for Surfline, and so I was out in the water, and you see a dozen. I'd never seen more than one, maybe two women out there ever. So to see a dozen out there, was very inspiring and empowering. So I was always curious about swimming out there. So that was the first time. So I jumped off the ski and swam out there with them because at that time always wanted to know what that experience was like. And initially I was just covering, it was an event story. I was just covering this contest. But prior to that, when I was at the LA Times, I did a 3-part video series called Chasing the Swell that was about big wave surfing. It was about big wave surfing and big wave surfers, namely Mark Healy, Greg Long, a bunch of South African big wave surfers as they chase a swell from Hawaii to Mavericks to Todos Santos, and following that swell, one swell, same wave, different places. So I got to know the big wave community very well. It was obviously there were almost no women at that time. But I loved the sport from that story. So it's like, oh my God, look at all these women that are now entering the scene. And what was most significant about that group of women was Keala Kennelly, Paige Alms, Andrea Muller, Bianca. But the Maui women, like when the Maui guys came to Mavericks, it was the same thing. Like when the Hawaiians come to California, it was like, holy shit, like this is gonna change the game. I mean, like they had never surfed Mavericks before, but they were just charging. Like I'd never seen women charge before, and they were really good. So it was clear to me that something seismic was going to happen with their participation in the sport. And so, so I just pressed record and started following them. Those 4 women kind of naturally coalesced as a friends group. So I just, I had to narrow it down somehow. So I just started following them, and, the story just got better and better. It's such a intimate portrait. You feel like you really get to know them, and you get to know their struggle, what their their gifts, and then also the thing that they're kind of fighting against. As a documentarian, and I don't know, I think in some ways this journalism that we share in common, there's an anthropological level, there's an aspect to it all. Definitely.
In spending the time with these particular 4 women, what would you say like the common theme, or what would you say the sort of, what do they have in common? What did you take away from it all?
On the anthropological note, and it is also what is in common with them is, my mom was born in an incarceration center during World War II. She's Japanese American. So she spent the first 4 years of her life behind barbed wire. And that story of 120,000 Japanese Americans, most of which were American citizens, has really been lost to history because a lot of it's the culture of Japanese. They just wanted to bury it and, become model minority citizens and move on. But the result of not telling that story, I think, is reverberated in my generation and subsequent generations, and it's a real loss for, a lot of reasons. So I just saw in these women people who were unapologetically asking for what they want, not afraid to ask for what they want, and an opportunity to document it. To me, I saw, journalism is often described as the first draft of history, and I really am attracted to that in journalism, that you get to be on the front lines of these things that are happening that, you can sense are going to be important, later on. And that is what I knew when I saw these women, that something historic is happening here. I just got to keep following them because I know something's going to happen. But what attracts me about them and their story, is just their fearlessness. They also, because of my Japanese heritage, I'm very much a people pleaser and, quiet, at least culturally, I've been taught to be quiet and the good girl and, not ask for what you want really necessarily, or to, find other ways of getting things done. But it was just so refreshing to and inspiring to just see these women like, no, I'm good and I can surf that wave and I want to surf that wave. Let me surf that wave.
Yes. Yeah. You get this. There's definitely a sense of arc in the story in the film, and there's some justice for sure, and things change. Hence the title, or the working title, I should say. But do you feel like it got where? Do you feel like it's gotten where it should be, or do you feel like there's still a long way to go?
What
in terms of? I guess there's like the equal pay in the WSL. And women have been included in some of the big wave events that used to be exclusively men without even thinking twice about it. But does it still have a ways to go, or do you think it's gotten to the place where it feels?
Well, in some respects, it's gotten to a place that none of us even imagined it would, which is the WSL having equal pay.
Yeah.
And just last year they have an equal number. I thought the next step after equal pay was there were still half as many women competing as the men, so that's less sponsorship, it's half as many, it's not equal. So, but last year now there's an equal amount of competitors, men and women. So that I think is wonderful. I think there's still a long way to go in terms of developing the pipeline and the bench, of the next generation coming up. Although the next generation, in some respects, also is performing beyond our wildest dreams. I think, in part because of social media and the ability for these women to see, role models and what's possible, and then to see a pathway because of this equal pay. Right? It's a real viable career for young girls that it never was before.
Yeah.
In the bigger sphere of things, though, if we want to just widen out to just sports, there was no woman in the top Forbes list of top 100 highest paid athletes for the last 2 years, I think. Prior, I think Serena Williams and Naomi Osaka have made it in years past. Some tennis players have made it in. And, that's the result of Billie Jean King beating this drum for 50 years, So we're getting there, but, we're talking about, equal pay. In terms of equal pay in the U.S. as a whole, I think it's like 70 cents to $1 or something. It's been hovering around that 70 to 80 cents to $1. But then you look at the athletes and it's literally pennies to $1. I mean, it's like Caitlin Clark getting, $70,000 versus, a $18 million contract, or, it's just a long way to go.
Yes. Yeah. The social justice aspect of your work, who have been thinking about that? And then, of course, there's the sort of visual elements and getting great shots and the beautifulness of it all. Who have been your inspirations?
As filmmakers?
As a filmmaker or journalist, documentarian?
I knew you were going to ask me this question, Jamie, and I meant to research it more because I'm really bad at names. But no, I mean, as documentary film, I mean, I like D.A. Pennebaker, Don't Look Back, Bob Dylan film.
Yep.
Just verite. I like verite films where the person is just immersed there. And I think a lot of films these days are really highly produced, and staged, really. So I'm always attracted to true, authentic verite storytelling. I really liked Fire of Love. It was a movie about these two volcano researchers. I don't know if you saw that.
I have not.
Sarah Dosa. That was really beautiful and lovely. let's see. I also like Lindsay Adario's work, as a photographer. She's pretty damn fearless and just so relentless in her craft and desire to get untold stories out there. I don't know, in terms of like fiction, Hollywood, feature films. I mean, I think I meant Spike Lee is the filmmaker that that made me want to get into the game in the first place.
Yes.
But there's lots. I don't know. Yeah.
What about the element of? I remember when I was interested in journalism, and I read. It was a quote from Paul Theroux, a writer who I admire tremendously and is now a friend. And he said, "Writing is an education in the public's eye." And that was so appealing to me because I thought, not only do you get to sort of make something and have this, get to put yourself into something and have this sort of self-expression, but you changed. And, the classic thing with the story arc is like you change in your characters, right? And your film does this very well. You see these four women and it goes somewhere, it moves. The filmmaker, the documentarian has changed as well. How do you feel like you've changed in maybe not solely SheChange, but all the work you've done, this large body of work and deep immersion and with so many interesting people in interesting places and in crazy places, i.e. like the tumbling around the lineup at Mavericks or Ocean Beach for that matter. How has that changed you?
Immensely, fundamentally, cellularly. So my first doc, Crutch, I started making it. It's about a childhood friend who had told me that he just got hired by Cirque du Soleil. I was getting disillusioned with Hollywood feature scripted films, and so I was like, I'm going to come follow you. And I realized very soon after following him, that I had no idea what I was doing. And so that's what precipitated me applying to journalism school at UC Berkeley and going into the documentary program there because I wanted to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
Then I worked for the LA Times. I probably made 100 short films, news haikus, I called them. And that was an enormous education in editing. And, editing is also a really great, way to learn how to shoot. And then with SheChange, I mean, that has changed me. Ooh, let's see. I mean, the physical act of doing all this water photography, especially in big surf, is as much like therapy as anything else. It also just gives you a lot of energy. I think another thing that attracts me about these women and big wave surfing in general is that you just feel powerful. You can see the power and strength in them. It's not anyone. You don't have to surf to know that when you see this woman drop down a 60-foot ledge of water, that they're doing something extraordinary.
Yeah.
Right. I have not yet ridden a wave at Mavericks, but I've ridden some decent-sized waves at Ocean Beach, and I've looked over the edge of a few waves at Mavericks, and even the act of looking over the edge, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, you are just infusing yourself with that power of the ocean. And so I guess I've become a stronger person because of the work. I also... all sorts of things have happened along the way that I think have helped me just with relationships in general. The other thing is I would be curious what your experience was with the Westerly Wendina project, because you often refer to them as a friend, and I consider these four women a friend, but of course, as a journalist, it's kind of dangerous to become friends with your subjects, or it's a little tricky, right?
Yes.
Where was I going with that? Where was I going with that?
Well, I'm guessing you've been enriched by your friendship with the four women who are the main characters in your film.
I have,
Yeah.
I have. And it's tricky because you also have to have that kind of step outside of your friendship and them, and you also have to be aware of this story, that some of the parts might be uncomfortable for them, right?
Yeah.
That you think are important to the story. And so just kind of walking that line, navigating that space has always been, I think, something that most journalists don't have to really contend with. But I think when you're a documentary filmmaker like we are, and you have spent that much time with your subjects, they are no longer subjects; they're friends. Like
Yes.
it's inhuman to not become friends.
Yes.
Absolutely.
There was a quote that I read in an interview with the journalist Gay Talese, who'd written about Muhammad Ali and other athletes, and he said, "I've never written about anyone I couldn't look in the eye afterwards."
And I like that.
I do too, and I think I somewhere along the line I thought I think there may have been a younger, more ambitious version of myself that thought like whatever it's going to take to be a superstar writer is what I'll do, and I definitely life has handed me enough experience to go that's not actually what it's all about, and I think. Adhering to what Gay Talese said on one hand, and also I really do value, I think the humanity, as you say, spending time with people and doing this really interesting thing, right? Because and you and I both do it where, we're kind of doing it now, where you're sort of fast tracking into bigger questions perhaps than you would have around the water cooler, so to speak. You're trying to get to the essence of things and hopefully you're genuine. We're genuinely interested. We do want to know there. And often it's sort of like we're trying to figure out things for us. There's always our own personal agenda. There's always this thing of having the kind of gnawing thing that we're trying to sort out through it all. But it's wonderful. I feel so lucky that we get to do this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. In some ways it's a harder road to travel. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in general, when I was with all of my stories, it's when you're a journalist, these are real people with real consequences to these stories.
Yes.
And I think it just becomes that much more acute when it's a longer, more in-depth story.
Yes. Yeah. Through SheChange, I got the sense that it felt like your subjects trusted you. There was a sort of level of letting their guards down, et cetera, that was apparent.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, as you know, access is everything.
Yeah.
And I am just, extremely grateful that they let me into their lives and have been extremely patient with this story. I think also doing these things and being on the other side of the camera, as I have been in recent years, has also changed the way I tell stories, because I have a lot more empathy for, the people I'm interviewing now that I've been on the other side.
Yeah, for sure.
The connection I think I was trying to make with covering these women's story and the Japanese American incarceration, that story was untold. And the bottom line is that I was not fending off, a horde of journalists trying to cover these women's stories. I was the only one there.
Right.
For most of the time. So if I hadn't captured it, it would have been presumably lost, And so I think I also felt, I know this is an opportunity to just capture this moment in time in this history, and an important history, I think.
Yep. Yeah, it's really moving. What in your life speaking of moving, what in your life has been sort of large and important?
The ocean, and just being in and communing with nature in water has been important. My family has been important, and along the way, the trauma that family has given me. Losing my mother was a very seminal happening in my life. Myself getting cancer was pretty important. And then in between that, spending some time in a rubber-walled room in a mental hospital, that was pretty important and has greatly affected my path in life.
Can we talk about that?
Of course.
How did you get to the rubber walled room?
Because I'm crazy. I'm batshit crazy, Jamie.
I don't get that sense at all.
What?
I
Really?
would say absolutely the opposite.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, well, I'm really good at
Yeah.
masking it then.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
good.
that's we do it. We all do that well.
Well, you look kind of crazy. That's why I'm here. Okay. That's why I know I could get along with you.
No, but I'm so curious, and I know, I'm treading carefully here because this is a podcast.
Sure.
But I also find this is the really interesting stuff. And
Yeah.
And getting back to what we were saying earlier, this is where, as a journalist, I'm curious because I feel like I've been on the brink of the rubber walled room a lot in my life, quite frankly. So I'm curious as to sort of what it felt like. So many wonderful people have been in the rubber walled room, though.
Who else?
Well, I was reading a friend of mine just wrote a book about Yoko Ono, David Sheff, who lives here in the Bay Area. He wrote a great book called Beautiful Boy. And the Yoko Ono.
I have a funny story about that, actually.
Oh, interesting. Okay, but the Yoko Ono biography just came out. I was reading about it this morning, and it turns out Yoko Ono spent time in the rubber walled room, according to what the reviewer said.
Yeah, and Kusama,
Yes.
she still does.
Yes.
She's like creating art as a 100-year-old woman. Oh, she has 102, or how old is she? I don't know.
Something like that.
I don't know if you had a chance to go to SF MoMA and see her mirror room.
I
It's
have
her
not
latest
seen.
work, but yeah, she's doing that all from. She lives in a mental institution, I think. But yeah, I don't look crazy because I don't think I was crazy. Like, I was pretty much perfect until I went into the rubber walled room. I was pretty much straight and narrow, like straight A student, Ivy League, just doing all the right things, very much a perfectionist. So it was a big rupture to my brand by going into a mental institution, but I didn't have a choice in the matter. I was, 5150'd, as they say in California. I was brought there against my will because I was a danger to myself and a danger to others, they deemed. Was your question, how did I get there? What was your question?
Yeah, kind of how you got there, yeah. I mean, I know that's broad, and I know it's probably impossible to put into just a few words, but...
Yeah, no, I mean, part of it was, well, I guess the first time, I've been twice in a rubber walled room. The first time was before my mom died, and I was a sophomore in college. I was a counselor for this orientation program for people of color, and there was a lot of just emotionally charged conversations happening. It was also, I'm mixed race, and so it was the first time there was a sizable group of mixed race people so they're like, okay, if you're black, go over here. If you're Asian, go over here. And then there was this like group of us in the middle that were like, I don't know where to go. And so we kind of formed our own group. I actually formed the first group at Brown, called BOMS, the Brown Organization of Multiracial and Biracial Students. Where even though we were from different races, we had a lot in common by being in those in-between spaces.
Okay.
But being in those in-between spaces is unsettling, frankly, both from the inside and from the outside it can be because, people like you to fit in nicely into boxes. And so when you don't and you start being vocal about it, I don't know, it was just emotionally charged, I should say. And then as a counselor in this program, I was required to make sure all the students were in bed before you went to bed. And so didn't get any sleep. So that's usually something that triggers someone.
Yeah.
And so I was getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep, the first few nights. And then I just couldn't sleep at all. I was wide awake. I was writing all night. I was writing these manifestos, and I was completely outspoken. I'm very much not the person who's, I'm not the person who's raising their hand and talking in public settings and, raising their voice. I'm actually much more self-conscious about that. But I was just standing up in the middle of someone talking if I was, offended by it or thought something needed to be said. Anyhow, I was obviously ramping up into a manic episode. The next thing I did after that was to go on a retreat it was the outdoor leadership training thing that I had signed up for. And it was like the fourth night of not sleeping, I finally was like, I don't know what's happening. But I also was noticing things like hearing every conversation, like in the bus. I could hear the conversation in the back of the bus, and like took me everything not to just start participating in that conversation, and just, racing thoughts. And so I just on the second day was like, I don't know what's happening, guys, but I got to rest. And I remember feeling like sinking into the ground. I was starting to kind of have hallucinogenic thoughts.
Hallucinatory?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Hallucinatory thoughts. Well, it turns out that the head of this program was also the head of psych services. So she came and picked me up and took me to an emergency room. Nothing was wrong with me physically. Then she took me to ostensibly another emergency room, and the guy's asking me all these questions, and I was like, what's going on? And he kept trying to give me a Valium. I didn't know it was Valium, but I actually didn't do any drugs at that point, and I was just like, no way, I don't know what's going on with my own mind. Why would I take something? Anyhow, I soon got the picture that this was not an emergency room, and then I just escalated, and I had to have one person on each limb take me through the doors and into this rubber-walled room. Actually, the second time was similar. I had that incident, started seeing a psychiatrist, started taking lithium, and then my psychiatrist, I somewhat blame for thinking that I was doing great, even though she knew that my mom was dying. So she's like, I think you're fine. You can go off of the meds. So I went off the meds. Then my mom died. And then it was just it was during my winter break, another not sleeping, writing all night. Thank God the internet didn't exist then, but making calls all over the place, and deciding that I needed to take the $1,000 I had in my bank and invest in Disney, and calling up so I was walking through this snowstorm in Pittsburgh, determined to get downtown to invest this money in Disney. My dad picked me up and took me to the mental hospital. I knew what was happening at that point. Same thing. You just get this extraordinary strength when you're manic, and I had to again have one person on each limb take me, and then they bring you into the rubber-walled room, and they pin you down, and then they shoot you on the ass with a tranquilizer.
Wow. And do you feel, did it help, or did it make it worse?
I think it was worse. I mean, it was very traumatic.
Yeah.
At the same time, I'm certain it's a direct line to the freedom I feel of being in the ocean at Mavericks and being terrified, and yet being able to survive that and kind of control that, to find beauty and comfort in chaos. All of that is a direct result of that experience, those experiences.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, very interesting. Did they diagnose you with anything?
Yeah, well, so that first time, the doctor, I spent the night in the room, and then the next day the doctor, I was really grateful for this doctor who just handed me a book called Manic Depression, and he's like, I think this is what you have. And I just remember just collapsing and crying and saying, thank you, because this is a long time ago, and it wasn't just in the vernacular then. I didn't know anyone who was diagnosed as manic depressive, as it was called then. I didn't know what it was until he put it in front of me, and then I read the book, and I was like, oh yeah, that's what happened. That's who I am.
What have been the ways in which you've sort of kept yourself even keeled?
The ocean is a lot of it. I think, so I take lithium still. I've taken it for 30 years. The ocean is full of lithium. It's a naturally occurring salt, in the world. And so I think that full immersion, the full physical, mental workout that being in the ocean gives you is the perfect medicine for me. I was also a competitive swimmer growing up, so I think swimming twice a day, 6 days a week, that certainly did a lot to keep things at bay. Little did I know.
Yeah.
And I see a talk therapist every 2 weeks. I have for 30 years. So meds, talk therapy, and then just trying to, so I think for me, the three things are water time, talk therapy, and meds. Those all kind of keep guardrails on my highs and lows.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the main things. But then also just taking care, and especially now that I'm older, trying to sleep,
Yeah, the sleep thing is such a big one. I think
especially as artists, right? Like,
yeah.
Do you sleep a lot?
I wish I slept better. I mean, I have been sleeping well. I think, but I definitely, they're my most unhinged moments that what you've just described. I think I could have easily been. I could have easily been in a similar place. There's always been a kind of a string of sleepless nights that have led to them, for sure. Just an absolute lack of sleep and kind of just feeling foreign in my own body, I guess. Yeah, it's interesting. But we're in an interesting moment, I think, right now with kind of self-care and wellness, and there's this sort of neuroscience. There's this language that comes from neuroscience that we didn't have 15 years ago. Yeah, but I'm always curious. But it's one thing to sort of have words for it all, and it's another one to kind of get ourselves to better places.
Yeah,
it's easy to say I'm bipolar, or I have this or that or the other, but and we have more precise definitions for it, but we don't. But does that make it better? And are the meds the answer in many ways? And I think I was on Lexapro for a spell, and thanks to a dear friend of mine who introduced me to hot yoga, I started doing hot yoga, and I felt that the hot yoga was, as long as I'm consistent, it does exactly what the Lexapro SSRI was doing.
Yeah, I think everyone is different. Everyone has their own ways. I mean, for me, I just couldn't guarantee that I was going to go to the ocean every day.
Yeah.
So if I couldn't guarantee that, then that's where the meds help. But it's not been easy to say I'm bipolar. You said it's easy to. I actually kept it pretty much secret for most of my career. I mean, for 20 some years, I kept it secret. Even when I was a tenured professor, I was doing a project with the disability program on campus, and the head of that program, who is sight impaired, was like, I don't know that I would disclose this, because we're in a institution where your brain is the most important thing. So to admit that your brain is faulty is maybe not the smartest thing to do.
Interesting.
Same with, I was going to do a documentary about it when I was at Berkeley, about the fact that you can't get health insurance, or back then you couldn't get health insurance if you had a pre-existing condition. And to tell this story, and my doc professor was like, just think twice about this, because you're going to be labeled the, crazy filmmaker if you do this, essentially.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, these are all good. And also I knew when that incident happened when I was in college, I was sitting at a dining room table shortly after that, or after I had recovered and was back, and I heard this guy tell the story. He was one of the counselors, and I heard him tell my story, but he had no idea it was me that he was talking about. So I know how people talk about people who are bipolar. Yeah. I also know, I know the consequences of being really crazy. It's not fun being in a rubber-walled room. So I think I've become very aware of that line. Like, I don't know if you've had an experience of someone when you're feeling that kind of on the edge of people looking at you like you're crazy. Have you ever had that experience?
I've had dalliances, for sure.
Like, I can definitely tell when I'm in a zone that people are like
a disconnect.
Yeah, people are like, you're crazy.
Interesting. I haven't had that to an extreme. I think what I've had, for better or for worse, that I guess another way to put it would be the truth sets you free. By virtue of being upfront with feelings and where you're at, the danger for me personally has been the hiding, to be the closeted person sort of struggling with this stuff.
Definitely.
And the more I wear it on my sleeve, the more it's not even there anymore.
Totally.
Because if you can't hang out with me based on my honesty with you, then we have no business together. And I think in my own life, I've found my ambition is more to be deeply myself than it is any other external thing. So if I was working with someone and I couldn't feel like I could express things, or if I expressed who I am and revealed or overshared, as the terrible term goes, and that person runs away, I would feel like, well, that was only a matter of time before that was going to blow up, I suppose.
Yeah.
You know?
But when that person's paying your paycheck,
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I also at the LA Times, I never revealed that because I also heard people talking about other employees like, oh, she's totally bipolar, blah, blah, blah. I was not about to say, I am too.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. There's, I think, but I think things have come a long way. I also am hoping that by talking about this, it is adding to the comfort level of people to both say it and hear it.
Yes, and I so appreciate and respect that, and I really mean that, and that's probably, I'm more interested in this conversation with you for that reason, what you just said, than like juicy podcast, material. I that part's not interesting to me. The part that's interesting is being open, where possibly a listener goes, oh, maybe I don't have to like play my cards so tight to my chest anymore. I can actually be more myself.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what has attracted me. I don't want to stereotype big wave surfers in this way, but I know that's part of what attracts me to big wave surfers, and the community is there's lots of sane people in there. Yeah. And yet what they do is pretty crazy to an outsider, and to be able to chase a swell from Hawaii to California and drive overnight to Mexico requires a certain type of mindset and a certain type of something that I think I share.
Yes. No, I feel the same, and it's beautiful that you say that. I feel the more, I feel kind of like I was spawned, my coming of age or my early teens, I was already so deep in surfing, and I was drawn to them. I think when I first came to surfing, they were these kind of exotic, interesting, wild characters. And then I became so in it that I was on that other side of that fence, if there's such a thing. And now in adult life, as I deal with respectable people, I find myself relating so much to these people that we're talking about. That obsessiveness, I suppose.
Yeah. And artists are those people too, right?
Yes, for sure. And I think surfing is less so this now, but the generation that when I came into it, it did feel like the marginalized or the countercultural. There was something far left of center about the surfers that initially attracted to me, and then maybe I became one of them at some point along the line. But I think there's something really wonderful, and I find this with a lot of my surf pals, is just being really comfortable in their own skin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's also based the art of an active surfing is about navigating the unknown and things that might kill you and things that are completely euphoric. You can go from complete euphoria to terror, right, in an instant. Sure. So those kind of highs and lows, I think, come with the territory, and to know people that can ride those so beautifully is something I aspire to, right?
Absolutely. No, I know. And I think we sometimes forget it when we're in it. And I can imagine you on a big day, say at Ocean Beach, walking down to the shoreline, putting on your fins and going into the water, and the current's taking you. Most people don't live with that. They don't surrender themselves to something so out of control, and sometimes I think in our surf community, and we're talking to an audience of surfers, mostly surfers, I'm guessing, we sort of take for granted how wild that is, to just toss yourself into the ocean with all the unknowns and all the things that there's nothing to hold on to.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what non-surfers admire. That's maybe romanticized, but that lack of control. So many people are just need to be controlling and in control. Yeah. And that's something I will credit my mental mental health or illness journeys is just, you just have to, life is out, and my mom dying, just like life is out of our control.
Yes.
You know?
But I guess here's the question that I've been working to find the words for, and I think I just did, is do you find that in the sort of, in leaning into it, so to speak, or unashamed, having no shame around it and not being secretive about it, does
It
that
being
alleviate?
my diagnosis, you mean? Or
It just talking openly about having been diagnosed, having been in a rubber room, does it feel like in some way that make you less likely to fall off the rails?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like the like feature film version would be like a bunch of friends go on a road trip and one of them's falling off the handle, and then the other friends go, "You're okay with us. You're good within our company. We got you." Mm-hmm. And then they're no longer falling off the rails because they don't feel that othered thing that magnifies the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Let's jump over to another wonderful topic.
Can I give one little? Of
course. Please.
I was listening to your Gidget interview, and I was reminded that Sally Field was one of the actors that played Gidget, and I was reminded that I actually sat with Sally Field for an hour in LA. My psychiatrist was the head of the UCLA's program, and Sally Field was portraying a bipolar mom on ER, and was doing research and got in touch with this psychiatrist who then put her in touch with me. And so I had this opportunity to sit with her and describe what it is to be bipolar. And I hadn't told that to my husband, actually, and I couldn't even remember what the film was or the TV series. And he looked it up, and it was he's like, so Gidget goes to the rubber-walled room. But it was ER, and she won an Emmy for it.
Oh, wow.
I didn't realize that.
Interesting.
Anyhow.
Yeah.
Just a little fun little story.
I see Kathy Kohner, the OG Gidget, around Malibu a lot. I mean, I haven't recently because there have been fires and everyone's kind of spread all over the place, but I would see her regularly.
Is Duke's open still? Or
Duke's just closed. A friend of mine just sent me a link to the announcement that it's going to close, sadly.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
And the Duke's
because of the fires or just
I think so. It's right where, I mean, it's not in a place where people will probably want to go and have a nice dinner because it's right,
God.
It's surrounded by things burned down.
And was her house burned also, I was
wondering?
wondering?
And her place was burned as well. Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, we were in touch during all that. It's really sad.
Sorry, I got you off track.
No, it's okay. But I was going to jump over to other sunny topics and ask, what have you learned from cancer?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the whole thing. I started telling this mental health story. I actually even went to a story coach because when Crutch was coming out, I knew I'd be asked questions about like what drew you to this story, a disability story ultimately. And I was going to talk about my own disability. And then I fucking got cancer. And I was like, well, shit, I can't talk about both. This is like a little too much to talk about both things. But here we go. Jamie's going to string it all together.
No, but I guess what I would say is, I'm kind of joking when I say like sunny topics, but I also think, and you and I have spoken before, and I think we did talk about this, but I think about William Finnegan's great piece in the New Yorker called Playing Doc's Games, and he hangs out with Doc Renneker, who's an oncologist. And there's a quote, and I will misquote, but it's something to the effect of, Doc Renneker says something to the effect of, what interests me most about cancer is what it does to people. And I think he's insinuating that it teaches people to live more, to embrace our limited time here.
Yeah, definitely. That is the upside of cancer, is if you can survive it, is you look death in the face, and therefore know that every day you can't take anything for granted, and so you want to live life to the fullest, and not put things off and pursue your dreams and all of that. Was your original question, what was it like having cancer?
Yeah, that too. I'm curious.
Well, it's not fun. I think I was very fortunate in that they caught this really, really early. In fact, I thought I was going to just skirt it all together because I had I had tested positive for the BRCA1 gene. My mom had breast cancer and died of ovarian cancer when she had breast cancer when she was 30, right after I was born. She died of ovarian cancer when she was 49. I was 44 when I was diagnosed, and when I was tested for this gene, and because I tested positive, I knew that I was going to do everything possible to not get cancer, which is still to I had a double mastectomy and a total hysterectomy, get rid of all of the lady parts that might get cancer. And all of the tests I took up until that point indicated that I did not have cancer. Until they did this surgery and they saw that a 2-millimeter tumor had already started growing in my fallopian tubes. Because it was such a small tumor, it was stage 1. And so I don't think there was ever a moment that I didn't think I was going to survive. I think that was my mindset going in. So in terms of, was it hard? I think the hardest part about cancer is just knowing that you might die, and then not knowing when you're going to die or how you're going to die. It's just there's all these unknowns, right? Yeah. The lack of control. And I mean, I guess the upside of my mom having cancer is that I knew those were the hardest things. And at that point, I had surfing in my life. And at that point, I also had big wave surfing and swimming in big waves in my life. And there's just a absolute real an analogy and also a reality that swimming in big waves had trained me to handle really big, heavy situations. And so I was very fortunate to have that experience behind me. It was still very hard. I mean, going through chemo sucks. I went through 8 rounds of chemo. I lost my hair. Chemo itself, your bones, everyone's experiences is different. But it was the first time I experienced chronic pain. Like your bones hurt. At least my bones really hurt. It was like painful. My bones were painful. You're in constant pain. Wow. And I really empathize for people with chronic pain because that was my first experience and really only experience with it. And it's horrible because there's no escaping that pain. And so it's pretty hard to be happy when you are constantly in pain. It's pretty hard to find joy when you're constantly in pain. So that part sucked. I had a 4-year-old daughter. Her seeing me with no hair. It wasn't a great feeling to know that she might be terrified that I might die. She actually slept with me in our bed, my husband and my bed, for like a year after I finished the chemo. And I mean, I loved it, but my husband was like, maybe it's time for her to move to her own bed. But I asked, I don't know if I asked her or if she told me, but I had told her my mom died in the hospital when I was not there. I was not present for my mom dying, and it's something that I would have I regret. But she said that she would sleep with me every night because she didn't want me to die without her being there. Wow. So, that's not great.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And there is this upside of total, complete appreciation for life and everything it has to offer.
Yeah, for sure. My mother's a breast cancer survivor, and she never complains about anything. And she's so incredibly positive. And I think she thought she was going to be cutting out quite a long time ago now. And so it's sort of that, it's a cliche, but sort of every day above ground is a good day.
Yeah. I do plenty of complaining, but when I get too far on a negative spin, I would be dead. There's just no question. All of this is borrowed time.
Yeah.
There's no question. I got the cancer exactly when my mom got it.
Wow.
I would be gone right now. So, this is all a bonus.
Yeah. What about being a mother? How old is your daughter now?
My daughter's 12 now.
What's her name?
Nami. Means wave in Japanese.
Great. Fitting. And what's been the great joy of motherhood? What's been the great
all
surprise?
Of it. I mean, all of it is a joy. She's just a joy. I think there's something about being a parent that is a little bit like time travel, I think. it's like this, it's this opportunity to time travel. And especially because my mom is not here, I see things in my daughter that remind me of things in my mom. And so you kind of just see this path. And she's my future elder, right? She'll be hopefully living beyond me, and be elder than me. So I really like that part of it. I like just forces you to be humble and unselfish. I mean, I'm plenty selfish, but it kind of puts some constraints on how selfish you can be.
Sure.
And I just love all of it. Just watching her grow, it's just incredible. Yeah, it's
Sounds
just
wonderful.
I love it.
Nice.
Everything about it.
Nice.
I wish I could have something more profound to say, though.
No, I think that
It's a big question.
No, but I can feel the love. What about surfing? What do you what kind of boards do you ride? What waves do you prefer?
I like big waves because in some ways I don't want to. In some ways you don't have to be as good of a surfer on bigger waves, at least because I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't keep that in, but
No, but I know what you mean. I mean, that's less of a gymnastic thing, but there's a whole other element of reading the ocean, and there's all that water person knowledge.
Yeah,
that is so skillful that
correct.
maybe the little whippersnapper
right.
doing 360 airs can't do, but the big wave surfer who knows when to paddle out for that wave or how to move with the ocean, they may not be doing the twirly loop aerials.
Yes, thank you. That is a good point. So that is why I can. Yeah, so I have that water knowledge, so that comes into play. But I am a terrible surfer. I am not even like being humble or modest by saying that. I'm a terrible surfer, but I love it. And the bigger waves just give you kind of a little more time to get up. And, I'm not doing like 360 airs. I'm just doing a bottom turn and trimming along. And I'm happy with that. Like it's thrilling enough for me to keep me going back. So I have, my favorite board is a 7.6 Andrini single fin. Vaquero.
I like this.
Yeah. Oh, good.
There's where I like this.
Okay, good. And just yesterday, 2 days ago, we had this late spring swell. Actually, at Mavericks is going to break tonight and probably tomorrow. I was going to ask if you wanted to see it, if you're sticking around. But I just the other day tried a Lyle Carlson 9.6 quad, little pintail or like a swallowtail. That was magic, actually. It was paddles like incredibly. I was out for a few hours and I caught one wave, but it was enough for me to know that board is going to be awesome. Those are. I have a Danny Hess, also another gun 10-foot that's pretty fun. I don't know, when you get to the 9-foot, 10-foot, it's almost like a different sport. It almost just feels like it's just different.
Yes. And when they're designed for the bigger waves, it's kind of a liability to have them in your quiver.
Yes. Yes. I was thinking I should maybe be wearing a helmet when I went out with Lyle's board, but I didn't.
My strategy for a long time has been not to have those boards in my quiver, so that when that big day comes, I go, I don't have the board. I'm just taking notes from the beach.
Well, that's my question. Why do you? Because you've said this, like why don't you? Why aren't you interested in big waves?
I did ride some. I will say relatively big waves because big waves have blown up. But when in my surfing prime, let's say, which would have been the late 80s, early 90s, in my 20s, and I was a pro surfer and I was on the tour, and North Shore was part of it, and I competed in Pipeline Masters, and I surfed big pipeline in heats in the Pipe Masters. Didn't do well, but I definitely was out there. It wasn't my thing. It wasn't. I wasn't. I didn't have the taste for it, I don't think.
Well, what does that mean? What do you like, or what was missing from it?
I'll tell you an interesting story, and this relates to something you and I talked about before we press record on this. Ross Clark-Jones was one of my peers. I think we were rookies on tour we joined the world tour at the same time, and Ross, many listeners will know Ross Clark-Jones, big wave charger, and rides Mavericks, etc. Has ridden Mavericks, and Nazare,
Winner of
etc.
the Eddie. Yeah.
Yes. There was an event. There used to be trials, and then you would surf through some heats and qualify for the main event, and then the main event was where the money started and the points towards the tour, et cetera, et cetera. There was an event, the Billabong Pro in 1986, I believe it was. The trials were held at sunset. The swell jacked up overnight, and then it was moved over to Waimea Bay for the early rounds. And so there were these rookies, 18, 19-year-old surfers who hadn't necessarily been to Hawaii a whole bunch, that were thrown out into at the time, massive waves, similar to like the Jaws scene in your wonderful film. This is kind of what Waimea was doing that day. And
I can't believe they moved it to Waimea. I mean, nobody was protesting?
there were a couple of people who didn't compete. I won't mention their names. Okay. They're my friends, but they decided not for me. But I watched Ross, who the entire year of the tour, because the season finished in Hawaii, all year long we were competing in smallish waves, and we were all kind of doing our little wiggling thing. And at that time there was no dream tour, so the surf contests were held wherever the big parking lot was, like a Huntington Beach, right? Get everyone down on the beach to watch this event for that week and weekend, and then that's your event. There were no webcasts. So most of the events were most of the contests were held in small waves. It goes to Waimea Bay, and Ross went out and absolutely charged. And I remember he sort of came in from one heat 25, 30 minutes later, and I would never look at him the same way again, because I realized, talk about genes, he had the big wave gene. There was something in him that it was just to his taste to like charge this way. Was never for me. When I was riding bigger waves, it scared me in a way, and I did, especially now, but even then it was like I don't really want or need to kind of keep pushing into this. So I so admire, and I know because you've spent so much time with big wave surfers, I so admire all of them. I really do. I'm fascinated by it, but I'm so content to be a document. I'm scribbling notes from the beach or from the boat. Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to imply that you don't. All of them are, of course, incredible surfers. I didn't mean you don't have to know how to surf as well. But a lot of it is mental, right?
Yeah.
A lot more is mental. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That's...
No, and it is a different thing. And it's also, not only is it like it's less of a kind of quick twitch muscle thing.
Right.
It requires much more of that kind of reading the ocean and that water person knowledge. But it also seems to have more longevity, because it doesn't, you don't see 45-year-old folks doing the most advanced aerial 360 maneuver, but you do see them like getting the wave of the day at some big wave spot like Jaws.
Yeah, that's what is exciting. I mean, I'm still getting better at surfing. Like I don't know. Pro athletes, as they age, maybe part of the downside is they get depressed because they're not as good as they once were. Like, the good thing about just starting late and sucking is like I'm just still getting better. So
yeah, you just raised an interesting point, because I think one of the curses of being a pro athlete in one's prime, which typically is like late teens into 20s, let's say, is it does require a lot of ego to do it. And then I think the ego will curse you later on, because you identified so much with this thing that you did, and then when you're not doing it as well, it becomes what was so exciting and what was an extension of yourself and an identity and all the things that you forged from that is kind of diminishing returns, and then you're watching it sort of fall away, and then it's not an easy thing. And yeah. I think all my contemporaries from the pro time that I enjoyed and experienced would all say yes. It's hard not surf. It's hard knowing that your best surfing days are behind you.
Yeah.
And you could argue, well, what is best, right? And that's the next argument. And
sure.
And best may not be. It may be about having as much fun as possible or pushing your children into waves. Mm-hmm. But in terms of like the high performance metric, it typically does happen in a certain window that is, say, before 50 years old.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what I'm 52 now, and then I've made this career of being in big waves. And so now it's like I do recognize that I'm not going to be doing this my entire life, swimming in the big waves. So maybe I'll be paddling out in them for a while, but I don't know that I'm going to be swimming in them forever. So So that time may come. But when you asked about being a mom, the best thing, I was surfing with her last weekend and totally crappy Lindemar surf, and her being next to me, and I'm paddling into it. She says, go mom, or body surfing with her at Ocean Beach. She's just started to body surf, and oh man, the first time she body surfed, like going out really to the lineup and then riding a wave with her and just listening to her squeal with joy, and then just seeing her eyes all lit up after. And I mean, that's the best part.
That's so nice.
And two boards I didn't mention. I also have an 8.0 and 8.6 Paizel. I have Paizel Cadillacs. Cadillacs. I have two Cadillacs that are my go-tos. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So I got to give him. Those boards are incredible for this area.
Yeah, Paizels are beautiful.
Cadillacs. I mean, they paddle. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. My last question for you would be your film, as of now, working title SheChange. Mm-hmm. When might it be out for our listeners to see?
Yeah, that is the big question. I've been talking about it for so long. I also listened to your William Finnegan interview, and he was talking about how when you wrote a story about him for Surfer's Journal, that was the first time it was like documented that he's making this book, and he was like, oh shit, I guess I'm making this book. I've been talking about making this movie for 10 years, so I'm sure a lot of people are going to be are tired of me talking about it and ready to see it. So hopefully, I really think I see the finish line. So we're going to try and get a work in progress cut out to submitting it to festivals in the next few months. Hopefully, I still have to raise a bunch of money to actually finish it for the post-production stuff like licensing footage, color correction, sound design, licensing music, graphics, all these things that people don't realize costs a lot of money. Yeah. So, but I know from my last film that once you are at this stage, it's so much easier to raise money because people can see what they're investing in. So I really, really, really hope that a year from now, it'll be out, maybe streaming somewhere, and everyone can see it.
Good. I think that's going to happen, and I'm so excited for you, and it's so, so good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and thanks for the chat.
Thank you.
Soundings is brought to you by the Surfer's Journal and is produced by me, Jamie Brisick, and Jonathan Shiflett. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Our theme song is Give Me a Wave by Oscar Matumiya and Paz Lenchanting. The Surfer's Journal is a reader-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Costa Sunglasses, FCS, Finisterre, Howler Brothers, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. The journal is published bi-monthly. If you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to visit surfersjournal.com and subscribe. Thank you for listening to Soundings, and until next time.